What's up, and welcome to the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Edward Lewis, publisher of BruinSportsReport.com, which is also Rivals.com's UCLA affiliate at Yahoo Sports. This is Ryan Kartje.
I don't have quite the long name like Edward does there with all the qualifiers, but I am with the Orange County Register, UCLA beat reporter. Been here for about 6 months now, so had to get a podcast, obviously.
And not having the same amount of talent to go along with the long qualifiers in his name, but he does have a better haircut than me. Ryan, I went to the barber yesterday, and it was awful, and I'm not pleased with it. And
This is true. My haircut is infinitely better than Ed's. I know you can't see it right now, but you'll have to trust me on this one.
Yeah, it didn't end up well. But things that also didn't end up well were, in our opinion, the spring football game, which is what we're here to talk about. We cover UCLA. We've been doing it for now. He said 6 months. I've been here about a year. But spring football game was Saturday night at the Rose Bowl, and it was a good turnout, but it wasn't as good as some people wanted and some people had expected.
Let's be honest. Spring games are almost always awful. It's just kind of, 2 hours into a scrimmage like that, and especially in UCLA's case when 2 hours in meant they just finished stretching. By then, part of you wants to claw your eyes out a little bit. But, there are things to be learned from a spring game. It's just UCLA spring game, even the coaches admitted there wasn't much to learn from that display last Saturday.
So let's break down. So it started. They sent it out, said the thing was going to start at 5 p.m. Get there early, show up, tailgate, do whatever you want. Start at 5 p.m. Scrimmage is going to start. They didn't get onto the field till probably 5:30, 5:45. They do some stretching, which takes 15 minutes.
Which great. I mean, fine.
Got to stretch.
You got to stretch.
They do something else, just drills, one-on-ones, whatever. And then inexplicably, they go into the locker room for half an hour, and we're all just sitting there what are we doing here? Then they wrap that up. Then they come out and they do another stretching period or whatever. Have a 30-play scrimmage. Go back into the locker room. Do this weird fan experience for another half an hour, and then come back out and finish the scrimmage.
Now I have to say, I enjoyed the fan experience, and I understand why the fan experience is happening. Who doesn't want to see a random sorority girl try to catch a punt? I know I do.
It almost hit her in the face.
I know we all just looked on in horror, expecting each of them to get in the face with the ball. And that's entertainment. I mean, I'll take that any day. But it's the fact that it was our second halftime before getting to the scrimmage, which, let's be honest, people are coming there to see the scrimmages. I mean, you're not going to get 15,000 fans to watch Pride Alley. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
So, but I mean, you can't start the scrimmage an hour and a half in. That was my biggest issue. And I know there's injury problems on this team. I get it. Do 60 plays, do the fan experience, and get out of there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know why they did that. The reason they did the whole first part of the practice thing was because of the injuries or whatever. They wanted to give them a bigger experience for the fans and whatever. But it was just bad. It was like watching one of their walkthrough practices. The Pride Alley thing was super lame. If for people who don't know what it is the Oklahoma drill where they line up and hit each other and block each other and try to tackle each other. Whatever. Super lame. The best part of that was actually when the 4 quarterbacks lined up and did it. And that was lame. Then they did the one-on-ones, which were great and stuff, but then they started doing individual drills, and it was just bad. I'm with you. I don't know why they didn't just have the 60-play scrimmage and then a cut-down version of the fan thing at halftime and call it a day.
Honestly, perfect spring game in your mind. What are you thinking? How does your perfect spring game go?
Well, they show up, they do some stretching, they get right into maybe a couple minutes of one-on-ones or drills or whatever, and then they get right into scrimmage.
Like a game, a normal game.
45 plays, halftime, where you have maybe a concert or a fan experience or both, and then they come back out and do 45 more plays, and you call it a day. It should only be a 2-hour thing. That thing, man, if you got there at 3 or 4 and tailgated, you weren't out of there till 9:30 or 10. That's a 7-hour day for a spring game? What are we watching here?
I mean, your buzz is gone by at least the first half, end of the first halftime.
And then they had the Rose Bowl set up because of cameras. They had all the people on the east sideline or whatever, which is the side that faces the sun. So, all the recruits dude, it was hot out there. We were sweltering in that sun. So not only did you have this long and dragged out process, but you also had kids sitting in the sun and fans sitting in the sun. And
I mean, that's
It
the
wasn't
question. I mean, you talked to the recruits. How did the recruits think it went? I mean, did any of them say, oh man, that was boring?
Well, I mean, none of them were going to straight up say that on the record, but there was probably a boring factor to it, but it is what it is. I mean, they knew what they were getting into. They knew that we were going to go there to rub elbows, sit in the sun, and then afterwards talk to coaches and stuff. So they didn't really care. I mean, it didn't bother them too much. I'm not going to UCLA now because the game was boring.
And granted, I've been to spring games before. I've been to 2 Michigan spring games when I was a student there. I went to a spring game in Indiana, which is a fairly sad sight, watching Indiana football scrimmage each other. But UCLA, the thought was behind it. Congrats for pulling it off. You got 20,000 alleged fans there. That's great. That's 7,000 more than last year. Just an hour shorter, please, next year.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Right, maybe even 2 hours. But they did play on the field, which was actually the interesting part.
Believe it or not.
That's kind of why we're here. We're here to break that down and stuff. It's a little tough. They never blitzed. Everything was super vanilla. I took play-by-play, and it was all like Brett Hundley out route, Brett Hundley post route, zone read. It was just super vanilla. Everything was real cheesy because it was on the Pac-12 network. You figure Mora, being Mora, didn't want anything out there. But, I mean, do you have standouts from the game? Anybody kind of catch your eye? Or even spring as a whole?
If I had to pick one guy from the game that stood out to me, it'd be Devin Fuller. The guy, he looks like, and you can pretty much say this about any of the wide receivers, but Devin Fuller, I think, could be the X factor on offense. I mean, you're talking about a guy who can take carries out of the backfield. He can catch a ball deep. He showed that in the spring game. He runs nice routes. He runs short routes well. He runs long routes well. I think if they can use him properly in some kind of, Tavon Austin-esque Percy Harvin role, which is what Jim Mora, compared him to, I think he could be one of the best players in the Pac-12 as far as, offensive skill players. And that's saying a lot. You have a lot of good wide receivers in the Pac-12. And, I think, if you look at their wide receivers, you probably think of him as the 4th option. And I think, by October or November, you could be talking about him as number 1 or 2.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying that all spring. Whenever he catches a pass, it's just pro. It screams pro. Guys, covering recruiting, you kind of see it when they're young like that. It's like, oh my God, that kid's gonna be really good. Joe Mixon last weekend, Sua Craven's all last year. Devin Fuller's that same way. Like, whoa, it's just that eye-popping talent, And I'm a huge stickler with 5 stars. If you're not a pro, I don't. You're not even touching a 5-star. And this dude, I mean, he has it. I'm with you. He was great that game. He caught like a 30-yard post route touchdown. And people were like, wow, Edward, like, you're not hyping up this kid. He's actually good. He was a stud. I'm with you on that. I think Brett Hundley is unbelievable. I think Brett Hundley has a chance to be if E.J. Manuel was the 16th overall pick, what is Brett Hundley? I mean, at this point right now,
I think he's a top 10 pick.
He's got to be better than E.J. Manuel right now. I mean, in his second year.
And E.J. Manuel started at least 3 years at Florida State? I mean, and never did anything spectacular.
Right.
I mean, he was solid mostly all around, but he never lived up to his high billing that people said he would. And what do you know? He's the first quarterback off the board in the NFL draft. I am totally on board with you. I think Brett Hundley, I wouldn't doubt if he went out next year. I mean, it's a great quarterback class for 2014, but he's shown that he belongs with those guys.
And he put on 15 pounds of weight, but he's still at 7% body fat, and just the way he runs the football now too. I mean, he just takes his own read and goes 30 yards like it's nothing. And I know people can't tackle him; he might be down or whatever, but I mean, he's going to have 500, 600 yards rushing to go along with his 2,500 yards passing and his 30 touchdowns or whatever. I mean, this is going to be a big year for Brett.
He also took 3 sacks in the spring game. Now, I don't know how much
he has me and you blocking in front of him. That O-line is so poor.
I don't know how much you can read from that, but there were instances, I thought, where he might not have been paying attention to the rush enough or might have taken a little too long for his progressions to get rid of the ball. But are you getting rid of the ball when you have a red jersey on? Probably not. So I don't know how much you can really tell from that. That is where Morris said he's improved a lot.
Right, his progressions.
In the spring. So, I guess you trust more on that. But, I agree. I think we're in for a breakout season for Brett Hundley, especially when they don't have anyone to give the ball to in the backfield.
Right. That's a big thing too. Getting into kind of disappointments from spring is how average all those running backs were. None of them were really bad. Bad in my opinion is just like falling up at the line of scrimmage, but they were so average.
No one stood out. Sure.
Just like the definition of a C student is what those three running backs were. Just if there was a hole, they'd hit it and get 6 yards. No, I can't remember. I think there was maybe 2 breakout runs of like 30 or 40 yards, and they were Jordan James juking somebody out of his pants and leaving.
One of them was Malcolm Jones, probably.
Yeah, Malcolm had a lot too. And that's kind of the thing too. Walk on Malcolm Jones and walk on Roosevelt Davis arguably had 2 of the better springs out of the 4 or 5 running backs in the whole competition. Like that position's kind of a mess right now.
I was just a little disappointed at the fact with the spring game that we barely got to see any of the running backs. Jordan James had 5 carries. Paul Perkins had 0. He wasn't even really a part of the run game. And I don't know if you can really read that much of that, but I think they want Jordan James or Paul Perkins to step out and really take the job, but these guys have given them no choice but to have, a 3 running back rotation that will probably end up being a mix of Jordan James, Paul Perkins, and Damian Thigpen once he comes back.
Right.
Maybe a little bit of Malcolm Jones on the goal line or when they need kind of a 3rd and 1 sort of situation.
Right.
So, but I'm with you. I think at this point, we're looking almost more at the point which one of these guys can catch the ball out of the backfield better.
Just take a swing route.
Because that might be a more valuable tool at this point. And, both Jordan James and Paul Perkins had long, swing passes during the spring game. But, like Morris said, I don't think we can judge anything too much until the fall with those guys. But you're right, though. None of them have really – none of them are Jonathan Franklin, obviously. And the coaches have told us that a million times. Please, God, no one ask anymore.
Yeah, it's a House of Representatives.
Yeah, it's a House of Representatives,
yeah.
Not the mayor. But I don't think they can even replace, I don't think they can get 1,500 yards out of that group, let alone 1,700.
The thing that stood out to me at the scrimmage, though, about the running back thing is they're almost resigned to that fact. They almost know it. I was looking at my play-by-play, and I think they only handed the ball off like 6 or 7 times. Like they know that this is pointless to hand the ball off. Let's just dump off a swing or a screen or a middle screen or just find some passes that are runs, instead of just Brett Hundley dropping back every time. So I think they're resigned to it. And then you got Craig Lee. His grandma texted today to say his ACT scores aren't in yet. He'll retake the SAT on Saturday, so he's still like a wild card. But I could honestly see Craig just coming in here and being like, "Well, I'm in the mix now too," because everybody here is awful. Like they're all just super average. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Is he good enough to step in and give those guys a run?
I don't know. He's not Rochelle Shell, and he's not a 5-star, but he's a 4-star Rivals 250 kid. So he's got a chance, but nobody's going to have a chance behind that offensive line right now. Somebody had asked me about that O-line this spring, and I was thinking about it, and they could legitimately have every single backup on that team right now be gone by the fall. Whether it's medical retirement, whether it's a transfer, whether it's somebody getting shoved out, hey, you might need to transfer, you might need to leave, whether it's pulling scholars. They won't publicly say that or whatever, but when you look at through the list, each one of those backup O-linemen has something wrong with them. Whether it's a touted recruit coming in and just never playing well, or getting squeezed out by the 8 O-linemen coming in, or 7 O-linemen coming in. That O-line is poor, which maybe is why that the running backs thing has been so average.
When you bring in a class of 7 guys at one position group, you're sending a message. That's obviously they're not happy with the offensive line play. It was obviously the weakest point of the team last year. One of the biggest reasons why they got blown out in the Baylor game. Right. That line was just
3 starters got injured.
A ragtag group that was, at that point, you just feel bad for Brett Hundley and Jonathan Franklin. There's just not much they can do. So, and you're right. I think they're going to be, leaning on those at least 2 or 1 or 2 freshmen to really step up on that line and lock down one of the guard spots. Because right now, I know Adrian Clem and Jim Mora both said that Ben Wysocki's done a great job at right guard this fall. He's not going to start at guard
he's a swing
in the fall.
back.
I mean, you're talking about that guard spot most likely being filled. I know that the two names that are most popular right now, Alex Redmond, Caleb Beninock, those guys, I mean, we've talked about this before. You think they can come in and be two of the best guys on the line, like, right away, right? I mean,
not best guys on the line, but I think they can have a Simon Goins.
Passable Pac-12 starter.
A Simon Goins-like year, where he's injured, because he's young and not in college shape, but he's getting the job done. He's blocking guys, making holes and whatnot. I mean, I don't think they're going to come in here and be all pros. I don't, or even make the all freshman team or whatever. But I think they can come in and be a passable Pac-12 starter, at least in their first year. Down the road, I mean, guys like Caleb Beninock, Christian Morris, Powasi Moal all have chances to be special players. But it's right now. I mean, we're talking just this year. They can be passable Pac-12 starters.
So we've talked a lot about the negatives. What about the positives? Is there a position group that surprised you this spring game, any of those? Any group of players that did better than you expected?
I mean, the receivers, obviously. We already talked about Fuller, but Devin Lucien, my guy.
His bromantic football player.
That's my guy. I mean, if any of you have been out to spring, I mean, we have a term called moss. And
Ed has a term called Moss.
It's when if you remember back when Randy Moss was like 1999, 2000, he used to jump over DBs and like haul the ball in, and then kind of jump over them, and that's Devin Lucien's special at it. And, every time he catches the ball, it's just straight moss. I mean, he's been great. Jordan Payton, I thought like, all right, this is going to be a cute little thing to fire up Devin Lucien. We're putting Jordan Payton to be the starter, and then it's going to fire up Lucien, and we're going to move him to starter in 2 weeks. Dude, Jordan Payton held off Devin Lucien. Like, he caught everything, and he was open all the time. And, I used to think
he never made a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. That was the biggest thing. I mean, he's not, I don't think he's going to go out there and catch 200 yards and score 5 touchdowns, be like Justin Blackmon or something, but he's going to go out there and catch you a bunch of first downs, like Shaq Evans will. So that kind of surprised me. I really thought going into it was maybe Devin Fuller, maybe Devin Lucien, and then you just had kind of 2 above-average guys in Shaq and Jordan. But it turns out those 4 guys are going to be special.
If I had to pick a position group that surprised me, it'd be the secondary. I mean, you look at that group, and you just, it's not a group that it really inspired much hope.
I still don't think it does, dude.
And maybe it doesn't, but, I mean, the expectations were so low going into the spring. And, honestly, if I had to give away a defensive MVP for the whole spring, it's Anthony Jefferson. I mean,
sure.
The guy, I mean, now, he was a highly rated recruit at one point.
Right.
I mean, he's not coming out of nowhere. But he's been hurt. I mean, he's been hurt the last 2 seasons. Hasn't really had a chance to do anything. And now he's taking advantage. I mean, none of us really expected him to do anything. And I think if he hasn't established himself as the starter, as an unquestioned starter at cornerback, I think that's crazy.
Right.
And this is something that, pretty much all the coaches agreed that he's had one of the best springs. I mean, he was going head-to-head. I know you were talking about how great those receivers have been. He's gone head-to-head with all those guys and beat them more often than not.
I think Jordan Payton and Shaq Evans were the only ones that beat him once or twice even. I mean, he was good.
And that's, I mean, for a guy we didn't expect to do anything against the best position group on the team, I'd say that's pretty impressive. And, aside from him, I think Ish Adams has had a pretty good spring. He started very strong, cooled off a lot towards the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he still might be a little short, and I think they may opt for a guy. I know they're going to try to put Priest Willis there first, even though maybe he's a safety in the long run, but they're going to try Priest Willis at that spot, I'm sure, because he's, 6'2"?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's something they would prefer, but I think Ish Adams is going to be at least a nickel sort of dime guy who can come in and make some plays for you, and I think that's, more than any of us expected. I think safety is a little bit of a problem. Randall Goforth has had his moments. Dietrich Riley was hurt for a lot of the spring, and then,
couldn't cover anybody when he came back.
Had some trouble when he came back, for sure. So, but again, like the offensive lineman, that's a spot where maybe you don't have to worry about it in the fall because you have so much talent and a pretty deep group coming in as far as your recruiting class goes. But, as for the spring overall, I would say they impressed me. I mean, They overcame low expectations. Put it that way. That might be the best way to put it. It's kind of like you. Kind of like your love life. Right?
I don't know, bro. Look, Dietrich Riley he's hurt, and he's been hurt, and it's been an amazing story, but he looks like a mini backer. He's not covering anybody out there. Anthony Jefferson was spectacular all spring. Ish was great for the first week and then just fell off. I mean, guys were beating him a lot more and stuff. I mean, he's still good, but he wasn't like starter good. Randall's a starter. He's going to be a starter. He's locked that in. And then, you got 4 guys coming in. I think that whole secondary could look different. I think Anthony Jefferson was the only guy there that really wowed out of that whole group. So basically, I'm saying I disagree with everything you just said. But all right, moving on. All right, sticking with the cover 2 theme before we wrap with the A block here. Just give me your 2 best players of spring. 2 guys that were out of this world good for you. I know you said that Anthony Jefferson might be one, but give me your 2.
I'm gonna keep Anthony Jefferson out of it. I'm gonna add 2 new guys that we haven't talked about yet. One, Kenny Orgioki, and now this, he started off slow. He wasn't really doing anything at the beginning of the spring, but it still baffles me. He's 17 years old. I mean, he's not out of high school yet if he's on a normal track. And yet, at this point, maybe if you don't count Aaron Wallace, who's kind of gone head-to-head with him at the left outside linebacker spot, maybe he's a starting outside linebacker in the fall at 17 years old. That still baffles me. I think, he's got the physical tools that if they work with him well, if he gets stronger, I mean, he's, going to add lean muscle, this summer somehow. So you're talking about an even stronger guy. We saw him in the backfield quite a bit in the spring. If he can give them a rush option on the other side of Anthony Barr better than Aaron Wallace can, I think you have to start him because – you have 2 rush outside linebackers like that, and no one's going to be able to stop you. So I think Kenny Orgioki's one guy. And the other guy, my kind of under-the-radar guy, is Darius Bell. Everyone talked about how much they'd missed Joe Fourier. And sure, I mean, I'm sure they will in the red zone especially. I mean, you can't really replace 10 touchdowns in a target. You can just kind of toss the ball up to, and he'll bring it down. But Darius Bell runs pretty much impeccable routes. He's almost always open. I mean, the guy just finds a way to get open. And I think he's shown great hands. I don't think I saw him drop a ball literally all spring. He was just solid, kind of like Jordan Payton, like you said.
Right.
Just never made a mistake. So I think, he's not going to be used in the same way Joe Fourier was, but I think he can be an effective Y in this offense, and I think, he can put up better numbers than people expected. So, how about you? 2 guys.
My 2, Anthony Barr is unbelievable. I know I'm not saying anything here.
Tough one there.
Yeah, but the guy was incredible. And the scariest part was half the time he looked like he wasn't really caring. Like he's like, all right, I've done this before. I'm the best player on this field. Let's get this over
I'm on
with.
offense. Yeah. Whatever. I'll catch a touchdown.
Let's get this over with. And he's unreal. Unbelievable talent. He's. People laughed when I posted that story that he wants to be the number 1 overall pick. But, dude, it might happen.
It might. I wouldn't doubt you there.
He is great. And then one other guy, I want to go under the radar here, I guess. Obviously Xavier Su'a-Filo is great, but under the radar guy would be Taylor Lagasse. I wrote about him today in my Week 4 wrap up. He was awful last fall. They had him at safety, and he couldn't cover me or you. And now he's back at the inside linebacker spot. He's making plays all over the field. So just under the radar, the guy that you can look at. But Anthony Barr is the best player on this team, and it's not even close.
To go back to what you were saying, if Jadeveon Clowney wasn't in this next draft, I think Anthony Barr is the best defensive player available.
The leader right now. Without seeing their senior season, yeah.
But, at the same time, he's not going to surprise anyone this year. He's going to get – they're putting a tight end on that side every single play.
That's fine. He's also going to catch 3 touchdowns.
Anthony Barr don't care.
Yeah, he's going to rush for 5 touchdowns. He's going to get his sacks. Whether it's 8 or 9. He's also got Marsh over there helping him double team guys. He'll be fine. He's going to do work. That'll wrap up the A block. Now let's kind of get in the B block here. B block is B for basketball today. See what I did there? Talking, we haven't done the podcast ever, but we haven't talked about it really on air. The Steve Alford hiring on air, and I wanted to spend a little time on the podcast today talking about it.
If only we could take live guests. I'm sure they'd all have very nice things to say about him.
Yeah. It hasn't been a really warm reception for the new UCLA head coach.
No, not quite. They haven't really rolled out the red carpet by any means.
And nobody's really doing him much of any favors. He's been on the job now, I think, 29 days. I think his first real day was April 1st. Jumped into kind of...
Depends on who you ask. Yeah. More on that later.
New Mexico still thinks he's there trying to steal his money. But, it hasn't been a good ride. First, let's flash back 30 days. When you woke up that Saturday morning, saw and heard Steve Alford was the head coach, what's the initial reaction?
Well, first of all, I was pretty dazed because for some reason I chose to get up 2 hours earlier than I normally do.
Knowing it was going to happen.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm sure my editor was pretty happy about that. But once I got over my daze, initially I was just shocked. I mean, I had crossed him off the coaching board a long time ago. He got the 10-year extension with New Mexico, and, out of my mind. I mean, we're breaking down every single coach from here to the East Coast,
right,
trying to find a guy who might take it, and Alford wasn't on our radar at all. Initially, I spent some time in Indiana. I know about Steve Alford. I know, how much people love him there, and it just struck me as a strange fit, just because. It's kind of a mixing of two basketball ideologies. I think, you have this historic UCLA ideology, John Wooden and whatnot, and then you have an Indiana ideology that's very different. I mean,
right.
I'd spent
Bob Knight, different.
Spent time with both. Indiana basketball fans and UCLA basketball fans are very different people, and I'm really interested to see how he handles the public spotlight. I mean, for now, with all the peer stuff, and if you're not familiar, I don't know why you aren't, but basically when Alford was at Iowa, there was a case with one of his players had allegedly sexually abused or sexually assaulted a female student. Alford stood by Pierre Pierce pretty much until the bitter end. Reports of him trying to convince the girl to drop any charges. Lots of bad stuff.
Right. Wasn't
that
good.
We don't need to rehash right now yet. But it's a hire that doesn't really inspire a lot of optimism at this point, and I think that's probably what you needed. And I think this has kind of turned a little bit faster than anyone would have expected. And definitely faster than Dan Guerrero
right.
would have hoped when he made the hire. And I know, you got to hire someone fast. There was already a feeling that they had missed out on guys. You had to make a hire, and I understand that, a lot of people are like, we could have waited a week. Maybe we could have gotten Greg Marshall,
right,
Wichita State. And sure, that probably would have been a better hire, but that's also not accounting for how impatient people are, and the pitchforks that were outside of the Morgan
right.
Center, ready to kind of jump on Dan Guerrero for not making a hire yet. So I don't know. I mean, I think people do need to give him a chance. I think all will be settled on the basketball court. I think summer we get a little antsy and we start judging things a little too fast. But I mean, Ed, you have an insight seeing him, on the recruiting trail. How have you seen recruits or people respond to the hiring?
I mean, it really hasn't been good anywhere along the way. First and foremost, it's gone back to the start of it. He would have been a guy had he not signed that 10-year deal that would have been right up there in that tier B of category. Remember, you had the tier A, which was all the long shots, guys like Brad Stevens, Rick Pitino, Billy Donovan, all those guys that UCLA thought they could get or fans thought they could get.
A John Wooden hologram.
Right. Somebody just out of this world. Well, he would have been right there with the Romars, the Gottfrieds, everybody. But he signed that 10-year deal, so we all wrote him off. But, when he came here, he's it's good, but it's all going to be about the assistants. And right now we really don't. They're all a huge question mark. The problem is when across town they hire Andy Enfield, which I originally thought was a joke. It's like, dude, this guy's coached in 2 games. Like, that's it. You're hiring a guy off of 2 games. But then he goes out and hires guys like Jason Hart and Tony Bland, and you watch them work the EYBL circuit, which is a big tournament, basketball recruiting tournament, and it was like me or you at a media buffet, dude. You just know what you're doing. You're diving in everywhere. You're doing this, and this, and then you kind of look over at Alford and David Grace, and they're sitting there next to Coach K trying to get Justice Winslow. You know, I mean, it's going to be tough to pull Justice Winslow from Duke and Coach K. You know, you should probably be going after, you know, Zylan Cheatham or somebody like that for now, you know, until you can build your brand and show that you can win at UCLA and stuff. So, I mean, and everybody's kind of taking notice of it. They're like, this isn't going very well right now. Their targets are a little weird right now. A guy like Trayvon Blewett, even a guy you're familiar with from Indiana, he's Ed Schilling's, the new assistant, his player. People are kind of like, you know, what are you doing really recruiting him? You know, especially when you listen. You know, I talked to Trayvon, and he really has no desire to really leave Indiana. He says, you know, in his head, he says, you know, I can if I want to, and then he deemed it 10 hours. If I have to go 10 hours, I will. You know, it's clear that it's going to take a real whole lot to pull him from Indiana, but they're at his games and they're recruiting him and stuff, and people are like, you know, that's a little weird, a little eye catching. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's right now it hasn't been going very well. It's not great. It's not what Guerrero had envisioned when you count the Pierre Pierce things, when you count the first 2 weekends of the live evaluation period, when you count kind of his interviews and stuff that have come across as a little arrogant, I guess would be the word, especially when he was asked about the Pierre Pierce thing and kind of other things and stuff. So it hasn't been a good first month here.
Now, I mean, we can talk as much as we want about...
And the Al Freeman decommitment, too, if you want to throw that in there as well. But
we can talk as much as we want about Alford's hiring, but it's not going to matter.
Right.
I mean, if they go out and win 30 games this fall, this is all going to very quickly be forgotten. Recruits are going to come, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
But can this team in the fall win games? I mean, like you said, with Al Freeman, I mean, there was some hope, at least somewhere, that he was going to play some point guard. And now they literally, I mean, their point guard played power forward last year.
Right.
I mean, that's not really a situation you look at and it inspires much confidence in what they're going to do. Yet, you know, now I'm a sucker for the way too early polls and rankings. It's a terrible, terrible habit of mine to look at all of them. And UCLA was a top 15 team almost universally, which... I don't know. Maybe I'm too close to the situation, having, you know, been around them a lot. Maybe other people just look at the name and they think, you know, they're a top 15 team, obviously. But is this a top 15 team? I mean, maybe it depends on Zach LaVine. I mean, he's coming in the fall.
They're uber talented. I mean, Kyle Anderson's probably a first rounder, regardless. I mean, he was probably a first rounder this June. Whether it's the last half or whatever, that's debatable. Jordan Adams, I think, is a pro. I don't know if that's this year or next year, but I think he's eventually going to be a first-rounder. Zach LaVine, I mean, might be one of my favorite recruits on the whole 2013 class. I mean, he's a guy that's 6'4" and can shoot 300 straight three-pointers. I mean, the guy is ridiculously good. He's, in my opinion, going to be a pro eventually. Tony Parker, McDonald's All-American, has pro potential. I mean, this roster is loaded. Like, if you look at their team now versus New Mexico's team now, you probably take the first 8 picks if you're drafting between the two teams are going to be UCLA's guys, and then you fill in the rest with New Mexico's guys. So his team is much more talented than the New Mexico team he just was a number 3 seed with and won 30 games with or whatever. So they have talent there. I get why people are ranking in the top 25. They have no point guard and no big man depth, but I mean, this is a team that's going to contend for the Pac-12 title again. But you never know. I mean, it's a big question mark.
Does Kyle Anderson make the transition into being a star player? I mean, I know, you lose Shabazz Muhammad. There's an argument to be made that, maybe there's a little bit of addition by subtraction there. Maybe Shabazz...
I completely agree.
Shabazz didn't play defense very often. I mean, he hogged the ball at times, for sure. I think, losing Larry Drew is where they're going to be hit especially hard.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Maybe Zach LaVine stepping in and playing a more selfless Shabazz Muhammad sort of role is something that would make this team better, especially with Kyle Anderson as point guard. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. at this point.
Yeah.
It's too hard to tell. I mean, we're so many months away. This speculation may mean nothing by the fall, but at the same time, why not speculate? Am I right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of crazy. And all the fans are about it too. Everybody wants to know what's the deal with Alford and whatnot. And if you're in the circles, in the recruiting world, everybody's talking about it and stuff. And they're on the tongue of everybody. It's going to be interesting to see how they go here the next couple weeks and couple months.
So let's move on to our final cover two, the final facet of our cover two podcast,
the C block.
The C block.
We call it the cover two thoughts.
It's a working title. Let's put it that way. It's a working title.
I take a deep half. He takes a deep half, and we cover it.
that was very very descriptive. Thank you for that.
It's a Lou Spanos cover two there. So, anyways, what it is, it's how we plan to wrap up the cover two podcast here every week or every weekend or whenever we get this done, is to give our one big thought.
Thank you, Scott Van Pelt.
Between each other to make two, and we're covering it. So
well said.
So
we're wordsmiths, everyone.
So there's that. So one big thing, basically from each of us, is basically what the C block is here. So Ryan, you want to start here with your big thing?
So, if you know me, if you know my love of sports, one of my favorite events in all of sports is the NFL draft, and literally almost everyone else I know just hates the draft. It's the worst thing. Media don't like to cover it, whatever.
I love it.
Ed and I, in some way, we're part of a weird faction of people who love the NFL draft. We literally watched the NFL draft in Ed's living room on his very large TV, drinking Shock Tops. It was great. It was a nice little bromantic afternoon.
Right. It's
and,
good.
Two UCLA players, and it's been a while since UCLA has had a first-round draft pick. 2006, Mercedes Lewis, tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars, has never really lived up to expectations in Jacksonville. That being said, I think this year's first-round pick out of UCLA, Dayton Jones, who went to the Green Bay Packers, I don't think the situation could have worked out any better for Dayton Jones. The Green Bay Packers are a team that has a strict 3-4 defense. He fits in pretty much exactly the prototype player that Ted Thompson drafts for his defenses. I spent a little time in Wisconsin as a writer for Fox Sports Wisconsin, so I caught a little Packers coverage. And Dayton Jones is just that kind of player. He's obviously moving to a lot colder climate, but he's really incited some excitement among this fan base. And I got a chance to talk on the radio a little bit this week in Wisconsin to talk about Dayton, and it's pretty clear that he's a guy who's going to come in, from day one and have an effect. And really, it couldn't happen to a better dude. I mean, he's got a great story, coming out of Compton, California, opted to graduate from Compton. Like Jim Moore told us last week, when he came in, he was labeled as an academic risk. And, he finished as a first-round draft pick. And I think, maybe I'm a big softy when it comes to the NFL draft, but that kind of thing just warms my heart. And I think Ed's laughing at me right now.
Warms my heart.
It warms my heart.
It warmed my heart up so much.
And I think Dayton couldn't have been drafted by a better team. He's going to fit there well as a 3-4 end. But the real surprise, the real shock, UCLA-wise for me, was how far Jonathan Franklin fell. I watched the draft pretty much all 3 days, if you can imagine, expecting Jonathan Franklin to be drafted on Friday, the second day, which is the second and third rounds. He fell all the way to the fourth round. The Green Bay Packers also picked him up. He was actually the second running back they drafted after Alabama's Eddie Lacy. But honestly, I don't want to be a homer here, and I'm not a homer here. I think there's a chance that Jonathan Franklin starts over Eddie Lacy at Green Bay in the fall. I mean, Eddie Lacy's got some injury risks. He's not maybe as accomplished of a pass protector as Franklin has kind of shown himself to be in the Senior Bowl. And I think, again, it's the same thing with Dayton. Couldn't have happened to a better dude. And, I think he may turn out to be one of the biggest steals in this NFL draft, honestly, in the 4th round. But the real highlight of the NFL draft was watching Ed's Dallas Cowboys select a 3rd-round center at the end of the 1st round, Travis Frederick of Wisconsin. And to see the look on Ed's face, I wish I could show you it right now. It was priceless.
But it wasn't just that. It was when they passed on Sharif Floyd and then traded down to take him.
I saw legitimate tears welling up in Ed's eyes. I'm not kidding.
It just didn't warm my heart to see that one. That was a very cold-hearting feeling.
Good old Cowboys. They never let you down, right?
But yeah, no, congratulations to those two. But my one big thing comes from this weekend. I covered a lot of recruiting, and I was out at Passing Down on Sunday in Fullerton watching recruits. The biggest name there was Joe Mixon. If you haven't seen him or heard of him before, he's a 4-star running back, comes in with a ton of hype. I mean, the dude is explosive on Twitter. If you don't follow him, I think he's at Joe_main show, something like that. I don't know. And he retweets everything, favorites everything. It's a self-promoter or whatever. He's huge. Gets a lot of hype. Gets a lot of stories written about him. And if I hadn't seen him at the Rivals camp, I'm like, this dude has to be overrated. Like, there's no way. And he went out there, and you can see on our website, it's BruinSportsPro.com. We have the highlights up. Our USC site took the highlights, and he was unbelievable. I mean, 6'2", 210, playing receiver. He's a running back, but he's playing receiver, and he's just going back to the mossing term, just mossing kids. I mean, it was incredible. Guys are looking at him. There's some guys there that had never seen or heard of him before, kind of casual high school head coaches like, hey, guys, did you see that? You see that guy with the pink socks? Yeah, man, he's going to be good. We're like, yeah, we know he has 46 offers. He's like the best player in California. Like, oh, dang. So the point of it is he has to be UCLA's number 1 target now, especially given where their running back situation is. He could come in right now and be the starter on this team today. That's how it says a lot about how average their running backs are right now, but it also says how good he is right now. I talked to him. He says UCLA is always going to be his favorites. It's probably always going to be in his top 3. It'll probably be a hat on the table at the end, which is huge for UCLA. I don't know if he'll pick him yet, but he liked his visit to the Rose Bowl on Saturday. But
I'm not quite the recruitnik that Ed is, but even I watched this 7-on-7 film of Joe Mixon, and it compelled me enough. And that's saying a lot for me. It compelled me enough to watch his highlights on YouTube. The dude is a pro. I mean,
unbelievable talent.
I mean, he's only a 4-star right now.
He'll be a 5-star in a month.
But he'll be a 5-star.
Yeah.
And, if you had to guess, twisting your arm right now, does he go to UCLA?
If signing day were today...
And remember, I'm holding you to this.
I'd probably say if signing day were today, I would say no, not right now. But I really do think they have a legitimate chance. I mean, I think they're definitely in his top 3. Right now, he still strikes me as like a national guy, like a Notre Dame or an Ohio State, just because he's big, like he's big time, and he can go there and be ESPN and Heisman Trophy and whatnot. And right now, UCLA is not quite at that level nationally in terms of getting that ESPN pub and Heisman pub and stuff. But I think 6 more months, Angus McClure realizing that this has to be our number 1 recruit, UCLA realizing this has to be our number 1 guy, they can really pitch it to him. And right there, we were talking, Dory Jackson's the number 1 player in California. He's right underneath him. Just gives you it. I mean, they're the 2 best players in California, and they're the 2 top players on UCLA's board. So, big-time recruit there, man. They need him.
And they're 2 guys they could get. I mean, it's within their reach, at least.
Yeah, they're both probably in their top. UCLA is probably in both of their top 5s, which is, I mean, that doesn't happen often.
Didn't happen 2 years ago.
Right, before Morrow got here, that never happened. So, it's big time. They have a chance at some really special talent here. So that'll do it for us here on the first edition of the Cover 2 podcast. Just 2 guys covering 2 sports at UCLA. He's Ryan Kartje. You can follow him on Twitter at
Ryan_Kartje, Kartje.
Yeah, tough spelling there. And you can follow me at Edward Lewis BSR on Twitter. And you can read all of his stuff at ocregister.com. You can read all my stuff at BruinSportsPort.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the Cover 2 podcast.